Libra, let me ask you something. And don't answer out loud yet. Have you felt it? That quiet moment where nothing looks wrong, but something inside you already stepped back. Not anger, not sadness, just a subtle realization that you've been holding the balance for too long and no one noticed the weight you were carrying. This message isn't here to scare you. It's here because you already know something is shifting. Softly, silently, but for real. If you've been feeling oddly calm, yet strangely alert at the same time, this moment is meant for you. Before we go deeper, leave a or in the comments if your intuition told you to press play. And ask yourself this: what if the balance you've been protecting was never meant to cost you yourself? Stay with me, because what's unfolding next changes how you move forward. Libra, that quiet you felt wasn't emptiness, it was information. Most people miss that moment. They rush to name it, they rush to fix it. But you didn't. You paused. And that pause mattered more than you realize. Because when balance starts slipping, it doesn't announce itself with chaos. It whispers first. Sometimes it shows up in your body before your mind can explain it. A deeper breath you didn't plan to take. A hesitation before saying yes. A strange calm when something that used to matter suddenly doesn't pull at you the same way. And I want to tell you something. As a friend who's watched many Libras walk this path, this isn't you becoming distant. This is you becoming precise. You've spent so much of your life sensing the emotional weather in every room, adjusting your tone, softening your truth, holding space so others don't feel uncomfortable. But here's what rarely gets said. Balance that costs you your nervous system isn't balance, it's endurance. And endurance quietly wears people down. That's why this shift feels subtle. You're not breaking away, you're recalibrating. There's a difference. You're no longer asking, how do I keep everyone steady? You're asking, where do I actually stand in all of this? That question alone changes everything. Notice how you're not reaching for reassurance the way you used to. Notice how silence feels less threatening. Notice how you don't need to explain your boundaries in detail anymore. That's not detachment. That's self-trust beginning to settle into your bones. And here's something I've learned. When a Libra stops over-explaining, it's usually because they've already answered the most important question inside themselves. What am I responsible for? And what am I not? That line is becoming clearer now. You may feel moments of guilt. That's normal. Your empathy doesn't disappear just because your self-respect grows. But let me ask you this, gently. How long have you been negotiating your own comfort for the sake of peace? Take a breath there. Let that land. Because what's unfolding isn't about leaving people behind. It's about no longer abandoning yourself quietly. And the beautiful thing is, you don't have to force this shift. You don't have to announce it. You don't even have to fully understand it yet. It's already moving through you, like light adjusting its angle, like weight redistributing until something finally feels right again. In a moment, we'll step into what happens when you stop holding the middle and allow life to meet you where you actually are now. Not where you used to stand. Not where others expect you to be, just here. And if you're still listening, it tells me you're ready to notice what comes next. Libra. There comes a moment when explaining starts to feel heavier than silence. Not because you don't care, but because every explanation costs you a little more energy than you're willing to spend. You didn't stop talking suddenly. You slowed down first. You noticed how often you were justifying your need to breathe. How often you softened your truth so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. How often you said it's fine when your body quietly disagreed. And one day, something inside you shifted. You realized that needing space doesn't require a defense. That clarity doesn't owe anyone a performance. That peace isn't something you negotiate for. It's something you step into. This is where many people misunderstand Libra. They think your silence means withdrawal. They think your distance means indifference. But I've watched enough Libras to know better. When you stop explaining, it's not because you've given up. It's because you've finally listened to yourself long enough to trust what you hear. You're no longer trying to be understood by everyone. You're choosing to be honest with yourself first. And that's a quiet kind of courage. There's a difference between disappearing and repositioning. Disappearing comes from fear. Repositioning comes from awareness. Right now, you're repositioning. You're learning that harmony doesn't come from constant availability. It comes from alignment. And alignment sometimes asks you to step back, to let others feel the absence of your constant emotional labor, to stop smoothing edges that were never yours to manage. That can feel uncomfortable at first, especially for someone who's been praised for being easygoing, for being the one who keeps things fair, for being the calm in the room. But here's something no one tells you early enough. When you carry balance for too long, you forget what it feels like to rest inside it. Silence becomes your way of listening again, not to the noise around you, but to the quieter voice within, the one that says, I don't need to explain this, I don't need permission, I don't need to overextend to be worthy. Let me ask you something, gently. How many times have you explained yourself, hoping it would make someone treat you with more care? And how often did that actually work? Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to stop translating your needs into language that minimizes them. Your quiet right now isn't empty. It's spacious. It's creating room for something more honest to emerge, something less performative, something closer to who you are becoming. And as you sit in that space, without rushing to fill it, you may start to notice something else shifting, not outside of you, but within the way you hold yourself, the way you stand a little more firmly in your own center, the way you don't rush to fix what isn't yours, the way your presence feels lighter even when you say less. In the next breath of this story, we'll move into what happens when you stop standing in the middle and begin standing fully in your own place. Just stay here with me. The clarity is still unfolding. Libra, this is the part most people never notice from the outside. Because reclaiming your balance doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't come with an argument. It doesn't announce itself with a goodbye. It happens quietly, almost invisibly. I've seen many Libras reach this moment, and it always looks the same at first. They stop standing in the middle, not out of resentment, not out of pride, but out of clarity. You didn't cut people off. You didn't burn bridges. You simply stepped back into your own axis. And that distinction matters. For so long, you learned how to sense both sides at once. You felt tension before it was spoken. You adjusted before anyone asked. You became fluent in unspoken expectations. That gift kept things smooth. But it also quietly trained you to stand everywhere except where you truly were. So when this shift began, it wasn't about choosing yourself over others. It was about choosing your center over constant compromise. There's a moment in every Libra's life when they realize this. Balance isn't something you hold for the room. It's something you inhabit. And once you inhabit it, everything else reorganizes naturally. You start noticing how your body responds differently now. Your shoulders drop more often. Your breath settles sooner. You don't feel the same urgency to fix what isn't breaking you anymore. That's not detachment. That's embodiment. You're no longer hovering between needs. You're grounded inside your own. And here's something personal I want to share with you. When I watched Libras go through this phase, the world around them didn't collapse. It adjusted. Some people leaned closer. Some stepped back. Some revealed themselves through their reactions alone. And that was information. Clean. Unfiltered. You didn't need to analyze it. You didn't need to explain it. You simply observed who could meet you where you were now. That's what standing in your own axis does. It clarifies dynamics without confrontation. You're not withholding love. You're redistributing energy. And that shift carries wisdom. Because when you stop mediating life for everyone else, you create space for truth to surface on its own. Let me ask you something, softly. How does it feel to no longer translate yourself in every room you enter? Notice that feeling. The steadiness, the quiet confidence, the absence of inner negotiation. That's not indifference, that's alignment. And alignment doesn't rush, it settles. As you rest here, balanced not by effort but by presence, you may begin to sense another layer opening, not outside of you, but within the way you relate to the world itself. Because when you stop standing in the middle, life begins meeting you directly. And in the next part of this journey, we'll step into why this transformation doesn't need validation, and how its quiet nature is actually its greatest strength. Stay with me. You're right where this story starts to deepen. Libra, this is where the shift becomes almost invisible to everyone else. And that's not a weakness. That's the point. You're no longer interested in being seen while you change. You're more interested in being real while you do. At some point, you realized that announcing growth invites too many opinions, too many projections, too much noise. So instead, you chose something quieter. You let the change move through you without asking for applause, without asking for understanding, without asking for permission. And that choice alone marks a different level of maturity. I've noticed this about Libras who reach this stage. They stop reacting on cue. They pause where they used to respond instantly. They breathe where they used to defend themselves. They listen where they used to negotiate. Not because they're unsure, but because they finally are. There's a calm confidence in not needing to prove what you already feel. A grounded strength in letting actions speak, slowly, over time. This shift doesn't need witnesses. It needs integrity. And integrity often grows best in silence. You're learning that not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Not every tension deserves engagement. Not every invitation deserves a yes. That doesn't make you cold. It makes you selective. Selective with your energy. Selective with your presence. Selective with your peace. And here's something deeply human I want you to hear. Silence isn't absence. It's containment. It's you holding your truth close while it settles into something solid. Something you can stand on. You may notice that fewer words now carry more weight. That your boundaries no longer come wrapped in explanations. That you trust yourself enough to let discomfort pass without fixing it. That's not avoidance. That's regulation. You're teaching your nervous system a new rhythm. One that doesn't spike every time balance feels threatened. One that knows stability can exist without constant adjustment. Let me ask you this gently. What happens when you stop trying to be understood and start being consistent instead? Notice how that lands. Because consistency is quiet, but it's unmistakable. People may not comment on it right away, but they feel it, they respond to it, they adjust to it. And that's how real shifts work. Not through declarations, but through patterns that no longer bend. You're not withdrawing from the world. You're anchoring yourself within it. And as you do, you may start to sense a different kind of clarity forming. One that doesn't rush answers. One that doesn't chase certainty. One that allows things to reveal themselves in their own time. That's where the next layer of this journey begins. Not with a loud sign, but with a subtle recognition you almost overlooked. So stay with that stillness for a moment longer, because what comes next doesn't interrupt your life. It quietly steps into it. Libra? Sometimes the most important signs don't arrive as answers. They arrive as interruptions. Not loud ones, not dramatic ones. Just small moments that quietly pull your attention away from where you thought you belonged. It might have been a sentence you overheard, something casual, something not even meant for you. Yet it lingered longer than it should have. Or a meeting that wasn't planned, a conversation you almost skipped, a face you weren't expecting to feel so familiar, or maybe it wasn't external at all. Just a subtle inner pause. That feeling of standing somewhere you've outgrown, without having a clear reason why. No alarm bells, no crisis, just clarity arriving without explanation. That's how these signs work. They don't demand your attention. They invite it. And Libra, you're especially sensitive to this kind of invitation. You don't miss the shift in energy. You feel it before you understand it. What makes this moment different is that you didn't brush it away. In the past, you might have rationalized it. You might have told yourself to be grateful, to stay balanced, to make it work a little longer. But this time, something stopped you. You let the feeling stay. And that takes courage. Because allowing a sign to exist without forcing meaning onto it means trusting that understanding will come later. You didn't label it fate. You didn't call it destiny. You simply noticed. And noticing is powerful. It changes the way you listen to yourself. It changes the way you interpret your environment. It changes what you're willing to tolerate quietly. Here's something I want to share with you as a friend. Many Libras think they miss signs because they overthink. But the truth is, you often sense them clearly. You just postpone acting on them out of loyalty, out of fairness, out of hope that balance can still be restored where it is. This time feels different because you're not rushing to correct the imbalance. You're observing it. And observation creates choice. Let me ask you something softly. What was the moment you almost dismissed, but couldn't fully forget? Sit with that. Not to analyze it, just to acknowledge it. Because signs don't always point to what's coming next. Sometimes they simply show you what no longer fits. And that awareness doesn't ask you to leave immediately. It asks you to be honest. Honest about how your body responds. Honest about where your energy flows naturally now. Honest about what feels forced. That honesty is already changing your relationship with yourself. You're no longer waiting for permission to feel out of place. You're allowing the feeling to inform you. And slowly, without pressure, that information begins to rearrange your inner landscape. You may notice yourself lingering less, explaining less, negotiating less. Not because you've hardened, but because you're listening more accurately. And as you do, another question begins to surface. If this sign wasn't meant to warn you, what was it meant to prepare you for? We'll step into that awareness gently next. No rush, no conclusions yet. Just stay here. Because the quiet signals you're learning to trust are about to lead you somewhere more aligned than you expect. Libra. This part doesn't arrive as a command. It arrives as an invitation you can feel in your chest. No one is asking you to decide right now. No one is asking you to move faster. In fact, the message moving through you is quieter than that. It's asking you to stop tightening your grip on things that no longer steady you. You've been so good at holding balance in motion, so good at adjusting while walking, so good at keeping everything level even when the ground beneath you shifts. But here's the truth you're beginning to touch. Some things don't need to be stabilized. They need to be released, not dramatically, not all at once, just gently enough for your hands to relax. There's a difference between commitment and strain, between patience and self-erasure, between peace and performance, and you're learning to tell them apart now. That's why slowing down feels necessary, not lazy. Why fewer conversations feel nourishing, not isolating. Why doing less feels more honest than doing everything. You're not falling behind. You're aligning your pace with your nervous system. And that is a kind of intelligence few people are taught to respect. I want to share something with you, as someone who's watched this stage unfold. Libras don't burn out because they don't care enough. They burn out because they care too evenly. They distribute themselves until there's nothing left in the center. What you're being asked to do now is simple, but not easy. Let the imbalance show you where you've been overcompensating. Let the discomfort guide you back to your own rhythm. Let yourself step slower without explaining why. You don't need to sacrifice yourself to keep the peace anymore. Peace that requires self-abandonment isn't peace. It's quiet damage. And you've outgrown that. Notice how your body responds when you imagine choosing ease, not avoidance. Ease. Notice the softening in your breath, the release in your shoulders, the absence of that familiar inner negotiation. That's your intuition recalibrating. This stage isn't about action, it's about permission. Permission to pause. Permission to choose rest over resolution. Permission to trust that clarity doesn't arrive on a deadline. Let me ask you something, gently. What would change if you stopped measuring your worth by how much harmony you maintain for others? Sit with that question. No answers needed yet. Because what's happening now isn't a push forward. It's a settling inward. You're learning that balance doesn't come from effort, it comes from honesty. And honesty begins when you stop forcing yourself to fit where you no longer belong. As you allow this understanding to settle, another shift begins to form quietly beneath it. Not about what you need to do next, but about how your world starts responding when you stand more fully in your own space. That's where this story continues. Stay here with me a little longer. The movement ahead doesn't rush you. It waits for you to arrive as you are, Libra. This is where the world begins to respond differently to you. Not because you demanded it, not because you corrected anyone, but because you shifted where you stand. When you stop overextending, life quietly rearranges itself around your new center. You may have noticed it already. Some relationships didn't end. They simply stepped back. The calls came less often, the expectations softened, the emotional noise lost its grip. And strangely enough, that didn't feel like loss. It felt like relief. Other connections, though, did something else. They leaned in. They met you without negotiation. They felt clearer, steadier, more mutual. That contrast is part of the new dynamic forming. You're no longer guessing where you stand with people. You're feeling it. And feeling is your strength when it's no longer overridden by obligation. Here's something important I want you to understand, as a friend. This isn't a reward phase. It's a reflection phase. Life isn't giving you something extra. It's simply responding to the truth you're finally living from. When you stop standing in the middle, others are forced to meet you where you actually are. Some can, some can't. And neither outcome requires you to explain yourself. Notice how your energy feels lighter now. Not excited, not euphoric. Just clean. That's what alignment often feels like. Not fireworks, but spaciousness. You may also notice moments of unfamiliar quiet. Less drama. Fewer emotional pulls. More room to hear your own thoughts. That can feel strange at first. After all, you've spent years being the one who notices shifts before anyone else does. The one who smooths things out. The one who keeps the emotional temperature comfortable. Now, you're letting the room regulate itself. And that's not abandonment. That's trust. Trust that what's meant to stay will adjust. Trust that what drifts away was never meant to be carried this far. Let me ask you something softly. Who feels closer to you now that you're no longer trying so hard? Sit with that. Because the people who remain present without effort are showing you something valuable about your future connections. You're beginning to see that authenticity creates its own balance, that mutual respect doesn't need constant calibration, that real harmony is shared, not managed. This shift also changes how you relate to yourself. You're not second-guessing your reactions as much. You're not replaying conversations the same way. You're trusting your initial sense of things. That trust didn't come from confidence alone. It came from practice, from choosing yourself quietly, from allowing discomfort without fixing it, from letting the world respond rather than steering it. And as this new dynamic settles in, something deeper starts to take shape. Not outside of you, but within the way you understand belonging. Because belonging, you're learning, isn't about fitting into every space. It's about recognizing which spaces recognize you back. In the final movement of this journey, we'll turn toward what this clarity offers you moving forward, not as a destination, but as a way of walking through life with less weight and more truth. Stay here with me. The story isn't ending. It's simply becoming more honest. Libra. There's something important I want to say to you before we let this moment breathe. You didn't lose anyone. That's the story your mind might still try to tell you sometimes, late at night when things go quiet. But it isn't the truth. What you did was stop losing yourself in places where you were slowly fading. And that difference matters more than you realize. I've been there. That moment when you wonder if choosing yourself makes you selfish. When you replay conversations, asking if you could have been softer, more patient, more understanding. But here's what experience teaches gently, over time. People who truly see you don't disappear when you stop overextending. They become clearer. They become more honest. Or they drift away without needing to be pushed. And both outcomes are information, not punishment. You didn't harden your heart. You refined it. You didn't close yourself off. You learned where your openness belongs. That's not loss. That's discernment. And discernment is one of the quiet strengths Libra grows into with age. You're entering a phase where your presence speaks louder than your effort ever did. Where your silence carries intention instead of doubt. Where your choices feel cleaner, even when they're difficult. If this message reached you tonight, it's not because you need fixing, it's because you're already listening differently. So let me ask you something, softly. What if the peace you've been searching for is not something you create for others, but something you finally allow for yourself? You don't have to answer that right now. Just notice how your body responds to the question. That response matters. If this story felt familiar, If it felt like someone was speaking directly to you and not past you, leave a quiet sign in the comments. Something simple. A symbol of balance. A symbol of peace. No explanation needed. I'll understand. And if you feel called to stay a little longer, to keep walking this path of quieter clarity and deeper alignment, you're welcome here. Not because you need guidance, but because you're learning how to trust your own rhythm again. This shift doesn't end here. It doesn't rush forward either. It continues in the way you move tomorrow, in the way you choose your words, in the way you honor what feels true, even when it's subtle. So take this moment with you. Let it settle. Let it soften. And when you're ready, the next layer of this journey will meet you exactly where you stand. Not in the middle, but in yourself.